President Biden is expected to lay out plans to overhaul the Supreme Court today. He has supposedly been working behind the scenes for months with constitutional lawyers. Now, it's widely expected that Biden will propose two major revisions. First, an end to lifetime appointments. He will propose 18-year terms instead, in a rolling system where presidents appoint a new judge every 2 years. Second, there would be an enforceable code of conduct requiring justices to expose gifts, refrain from public political activity, and recuse themselves from cases they or their spouses have a conflict of interest surrounding. Now, currently, justices police themselves. Think of Clarence Thomas, for instance, his breach of ethics in not revealing gifts such as trips and tuition payments, or his wife, Ginny, who's supposed to work to support Donald Trump. Now, these moves would have to be approved by Congress, which is a highly unlikely way forward in this divided political moment, but polls say many Americans are strongly in favor of term limits. Now that the conservatives have had the upper hand in eroding rights for the LGBTQ+ community and women, we've witnessed the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and there have been calls for more cases to be heard to overturn other precedents. Now, is Biden onto something? What do you make of this push to have more Supreme Court reforms following the conservative takeover of the court?
It will not happen. So there's little point to even speculate, because unless the Democrats obtain 60 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House and hold the presidency, there will be no such thing taking place. I will remind everyone that the last time there was a serious effort to change the composition or the function of the Supreme Court was during the reign of FDR, and it ended up being wildly unpopular. He was sick of having his ambitious, I would argue, big government legislative agenda thwarted by the Supreme Court, and so then he proposed expanding, adding a number of seats that he would appoint so that he could get his will enacted, and it led to massive blowback. So anyway, this is not going to happen. Would it be a good idea to have 18-year term limits for the Supreme Court? I think that would be fine. I'm generally enthusiastic about term limits. You could certainly imagine a system where the president gets a certain amount of automatic appointments because there's these scheduled retirements. But, let's be clear about why this is being proposed. This is being proposed because, the current composition of the Supreme Court is hostile to I would argue, again, a big government, liberal, democratic, progressive agenda. And if Democrats could consistently win elections, then they would slowly replace the federal judiciary and eventually even the Supreme Court with people they would pick. And if the composition of the court was mostly Democratic and run by the Democratic Party, and Republicans started proposing, changing the system in order to have more of their people on it, I'm sure Democrats and the media would complain about the attack on our institutions. This is one of the institutions that you're proposing to wholly change. Because you can't just win or take control of it the normal way, the way everybody else does? I don't know. Seems like sour grapes to me.
I don't know. I think that FDR's 70% approval rating speaks to his position being extremely popular. His efforts to have the economy bounce back post-war is something that conservatives talked to me about on the Bernie campaign. Before even knowing what a Green New Deal was, there were voters who were Republicans who said, I don't get why we don't just have something like we had under Roosevelt, like the New Deal, where we can build things like clean energy. People are coming up with this idea themselves. But then when they hear the Green New Deal and hear how it's been villainized, suddenly they don't like it. Calling things by another name, where the media hasn't soured the working class's taste for them, actually giving jobs to people and spurring industry growth is very popular.
Well, regardless of whether it's popular or not, the conservative view is that FDR's schemes, the New Deal, far from alleviating the Great Depression, actually extended and worsened it, because the worst thing you can do when you're in an economic catastrophe is to empower the government to micromanage the economy. It did not work. We had persistent and enduring depression up until basically World War II. That all of the schemes and programs and administration and centralizing of authority did not actually fix the economy whatsoever. So that, again, that we can argue about that. I'm certainly not an expert on the time period, but that's the conservative view, is not that, oh, we need something like the New Deal, is that the New Deal was a travesty and a failure, and whose legacy we're confronting now in terms of the runaway growth of the federal government, the total erosion of local control of any issue. That is FDR's legacy, and we deal with it.
That is not FDR's legacy. There's no control of the federal government over local governance. They have their own budgets. No.
Everything is a federal issue.
Okay, Robby. I think many economists would disagree with the categorization that FDR's New Deal policies,
many
which
economists would disagree. Economists
Yes.
disagree, and they argue about this subject with economists of your bent saying it was good and endless government spending is great. Economists of my bent saying no, but
there's a reason he had a 70% approval rating. But let's go back to the Supreme Court. I think it's very scary to live in a time when you have Donald Trump, who has appointed these justices that have asked to overturn more precedents, have overturned a women's federal guaranteed right to abortion, which was something that was considered to be a constitutional right under the 14th Amendment's right to privacy. It's between a woman and her doctor what she decides to do with her body. Now that's gone, and in that decision, you had Thomas writing that the court should consider all substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. There is a call to overturn significant precedents. They're asking for these cases, and the Supreme Court has discretion to pick what cases they hear. This is a court, thanks to Trump's appointed justices, that has gone rogue, that is deciding to overturn our guaranteed basic rights in the Bill of Rights. So 5 to 9 justices need to vote to hear a case. That's how a case is heard. They have over 7,000 cases before them that they could pick from, and 3 to 4 legal clerks that are typically people fresh out of law school are the ones reading these cases and deciding which cases the court will hear. There's not like some official process, so they can just take their pick.
That is the official process. What you described as the official process. I mean, it's always.
But it doesn't.
Like that.
It's not like the courts are guaranteed to hear certain cases where there's a constitutional question.
Correct.
Legal clerks get to take their pick.
If they're not hearing it, then the lower court decision stands.
But this is not like a process that's outlined in the Constitution for how this should happen. It's largely one that came out of a void of that decision-making process, just being, let's hear amicus curiae briefs, let's decide what cases we want to hear out of 7,000. That's way too many cases. I guarantee you the framers did not anticipate this to happen this way. 3 to 4 law clerks reading thousands of cases saying, like, I think you guys should hear this one. This is ridiculous, but this is what we're dealing with in America right now. They're handpicking which rights.
Don't talk to me about that the framers did not anticipate. The framers did not anticipate the federal government growing so vast and engaging in so much that they would have considered totally outside the purview of the federal government.
That is so not the point, Robby.
So many suits.
The point is that it's a ridiculous process to have 3 to 4 people fresh out of law school handpicking cases out of 7,000 that only 5 out of 9 justices need to decide to hear. That's how we decide to hear a Supreme Court decision.
Well,
so they can pick out of many which rights they want to overturn. That's the legacy of Trump's administration. That's what's scary about another Trump administration, because he's been given immunity. And as Sotomayor wrote in her dissent, he could have a group of people just decide to assassinate his political opponents. And if it's an official act, he has legal immunity. We believe no one's above the law. And this court deciding in that way, I think, is what contributed to Trump's approval rating being so low. People are afraid of having a king in America.
That's a caricature of what he said. They said that he has immunity for official acts. Now I was troubled by the decision, by the way. I was not a supporter of the decision. I think they ought to have been clearer than what are the official acts. They did not define the official acts. They did not say he could assassinate someone and that'd be an official fact, it would be fine. They said there are limitations, just that if it's an official act. They didn't say specifically what official act is, which I have a problem with, but they did not say he could assassinate someone. That's liberal.
Yes, that is what
arrangement.
What the justice on the Supreme Court said the outcome.
Well, that's what the dissenter said she worried could happen.
That is what she says the impact of this would be. A sitting Supreme Court justice said this. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he will now be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune.
Right,
takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune.
That was her opinion in the minority decision. The majority decision did not say he could assassinate someone and that would be an official act.
This is what she said the impact of the majority justice's decision is.
Well, that's right. It's just her prediction. It's her opinion. It's not. It's not.
This is a sitting Supreme Court justice saying what the impact of a decision will be, Robbie. That's to be taken seriously.
I think it is.
And I think that's what people are afraid of.
But it's different than the Supreme Court.
I think that's why his favorability is so low. I think that's why Biden could gain a lot of popularity for pushing reforms. Why should someone serve for life until they're near death?
The reality is, in order to get these reforms through, the Democrats would need to win elections massively all over the country. And if they did that, they could just eventually appoint all their Supreme Court justices anyway. So it ends up being the same problem. You want to change the Supreme Court? You don't like what it's ruling and what it's doing? Democrats have to win elections consistently then.
Don't you think people are afraid of federal power because they don't want people to have the kind of power someone has where they rule for life? Don't you think 18-year term limits is like good in the direction of freedom and not giving a few individuals too much power over us?
Yeah.
Don't you think that will ensure more democracy? Why would Republicans be against that?
I didn't say that I was against it. I said
but why do you think
term
Republicans
limits
would
are
be? Why would
a
we need a
fine
supermajority for this to be
appealing
popular?
idea. They're not, because the current Supreme Court is run by conservatives, so they're not going to want to do anything that affects that. You're right. If the Supreme Court had more Democrats on it, then Republicans would be in support of term limits for them, and Democrats would be opposing it. Let's not pretend this isn't a political question. This is an effort to get more of your people, if you're a Democrat, onto the Supreme Court and more of your policies in effect, and that doesn't benefit the Republicans right now, so they don't support it. If it benefited them, they would support it, and Democrats would not. It's not about anything else. It's about getting one's policy preferences through the Supreme Court. That's what's really at stake here. And in order to do that, you have to win elections.
So, yes,
right?
18-year term limits.
I mean, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Okay. Why do you think Republicans would be against that?
I just said it, because they don't.
But their guys would be in for 18 years.
They don't want the current. Well, I don't know. Kavanaugh and
so they intentionally
John
chose
Roberts
young people.
And yeah, absolutely they did. Of course they did.
But don't you think it matters someone's wisdom and experience?
Yeah, but there's a lot of qualified people here. They're trying to maximize the time that people who are going to make decisions that they want are going to spend on the Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett, very young. Brett Kavanaugh, very young. Neil Gorsuch, very young. That's why those decisions were made.
I think it could
They're being
cost them
strategic.
An election to say, we want our guys to be in. They're making decisions that are wildly unpopular, polling shows, and they're saying we want them to rule for life. That is a very scary thing in America.
The Supreme Court doesn't have to do what's popular. The Supreme Court is doing what they think is legal and
but people
constitutional
elected
based
to
on
the
law.
Senate and the Congress have to do what's popular. And try convincing to your everyday working class constituents that these decisions that are very popular, that polling shows are unpopular on a national scale, why these people should serve for life. Because they like them, because the Heritage Foundation that gives them money and invites them to galas likes them. Tell that to all of your constituents. This could cost Republicans the election this time around and in many, many, many years.
I don't think the composition of the Supreme Court is hurting Republicans. I think the abortion decision, yes, hurt them. Some of these other decisions, I don't know that people are paying enough attention to have detailed thoughts about. But we'll see, I guess.
We will see. More Rising after this.